Next witness, Mr. Wu.
The next Crown witness is Constable Ugart.
Can you stand, please? Do you wish to swear or affirm?
Affirm.
Okay. Do you affirm that the evidence you give today shall be the truth to your best knowledge, information, and belief?
I affirm.
Please sit and spell your last name.
Ugarte, Ugarte.
Please speak clearly and loudly for the record.
Thank you.
Now, Constable Ugart, I understand that you are currently a police officer with Yorktown Police Service.
Yes, that's correct.
And how long have you been a police officer?
Just over 1 year.
And I want to take your memory back to the evening of June the 12th, 2009. Do you have a recollection of that date?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell me whether or not you were employed by Yorktown Police Service on that date? And if so, what your duties and responsibilities were on that particular date?
I was employed on that day, and my duties were to provide armed, uniformed backup for Detective Fantasia.
And tell me what that means, armed backup for Detective Fantasia. What was it? What was your understanding as to what it was that Detective Fantasia was doing on that particular night?
Detective Fantasia was out that night taking opportunity drug sales undercover, and my duty as a armed and uniformed officer was to first provide protection, as I had the means to provide that, and to also effect arrests in any case that Detective Fantasia needed any help.
And I understand that the two of you were located at that particular time at Charles Kane Park here in Yorktown. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you recall at some point seeing Officer Fantasia in the park area?
Yes.
And what is your proximity to that officer while he is attempting to make these drug buys or walking through the park looking for potential drug sellers? How far away are you from him?
I was about 100 meters away in a secretive location.
And are you, we've heard, let me rephrase that. What are you wearing on that particular evening?
I'm wearing my police issued uniform.
All right, and what does that consist of?
I was wearing a hat with the identification of the Windsor Police Services, or the Yorktown Police Services, a uniform, white shirts with a badge, and a jacket.
The jacket have police officer markings on it?
Yes, it did.
All right. And to the best of your recollection, what was Officer Fantasia wearing?
He was wearing a hoodie and jeans.
And to the best of your knowledge as a police officer in this city, does Charles Kane Park, or what, if any, reputation does Charles Kane Park have within this city?
It has a reputation for having drug sales and drug use within the park.
All right, so at some point in the evening, you see some interaction between Officer Fantasia and another individual. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And about what time of the day is that, or the evening is that?
23:30, 11:30.
And tell me what it is that you see.
I see Detective Fantasia in the park, and he's approached by the accused. And it was a very brief, about 30 to 60-second exchange, in which point then it became identifiably aggressive, kind of worrisome, and that's when I began to approach the situation.
Aside from the accused, what or who, if anyone else, was there? Do you recall seeing anybody else there?
Well, there's Friedman. Friedman was the initial person, and then it was the accused who came in afterwards.
All right. Well, let's talk about that. Let's break this into two spots. So there's this other person you've identified as who? I'm sorry.
Friedman.
Friedman. Mm-hmm. How about the name Friedbrain? Does that make
Friedbrain? Yes.
Is that someone that you know?
Yes, they're identifiable as a parolee, someone who is known to the police services.
Well, at the time, did you know it was this Mr. Friedbrain from your location and from looking into the park from where Detective Constable Fantasia was? Did you know it was this person, Friedbrain?
Yes, I knew that it was them.
So you're close enough to be able to see him and identify him?
Yes, the area was well lit, and I was able to see.
And what, if anything, do you see occur or happen between Detective Constable Fantasia and Mr. Friedbrain?
Well, it was about a 30 to 60 second exchange, at which point it became very animated, as in it was a very lively discussion. And at that point, I saw Detective Fantasia place his hands on Mr. Friedbrain, and at that point, it became very aggressive. Friedbrain moved backwards and moved into a combative stance, and at that point, I was rushing towards the scene.
All right. So describe for me again what, if any, physical contact occurred between Mr. Friedbrain and Detective Constable Fantasia. Describe that for me.
The initial contact was Detective Fantasia. He placed his hand on Mr. Friedbrain. At that point, the combative stance began, and he made the moves to punch and kick at the detective. And I was still about 100 meters away at that point, because at that point, I was now just commencing my approach.
All right, were you able to overhear any of the conversation that was taking place between Detective Constable Fantasia and Mr. Friedbrain?
No, I was not.
And who was doing the punching and kicking?
It was Friedbrain.
So what did you see happen next?
At that point, the Detective Fantasia gained the upper hand, and he was able to take Friedbrain to the ground, and they were struggling. Detective Fantasia was on top of him, commencing an arrest.
And what happened next?
I was about 20 meters away when I saw the accused approach and pull Detective Fantasia off of Friedbrain and commenced the struggle. And then the accused had then punched Detective Fantasia in the face.
So let's break that down a little bit then. So at the point that the accused, I'm not sure if there's any issue with regard to identity left, Your Honor, or not.
There's not.
No, I think it's reasonably clear. First of all, Fantasia identified him, and the cross-examination was not that it wasn't Mr. O'Brien, it was that whatever Mr. O'Brien did was justified, is really what I took from the cross-examination.
So do I understand your evidence then, officer, that you are approximately 20 meters away from the altercation between Fantasia and Friedbrain when you see the accused become involved?
I was during the punch. I was 20 meters away when I saw the accused punch Detective Fantasia.
How far are you away from this altercation when you first see the accused either approach the struggle between Fantasia and Friedbrain or become involved in that somehow? How far away are you?
Between the 20 meters and 100 meters, so roughly halfway.
And can you tell me what, if anything, you hear Detective Fantasia say to the accused?
I couldn't hear the detective say anything to the accused. I heard the accused yell, "Get off of him," or something to that similar likeness.
Sorry, you heard Mr. Friedbrain tell...
No, the accused. The accused. He is something off to the side. As I was approaching, I heard "Get off of him," and then moments later, that's when I saw the accused actually wrestling with the detective.
So you heard the accused tell Detective Fantasia to get off him?
I couldn't be certain that it was the accused. I just heard it from the side.
Oh, I see.
Wait, just have a moment, please. All right, so you see the accused approach, and does the accused at some point have physical contact with Officer Fantasia?
Yes, I saw him grab him by the collar and pull him off.
All right.
At that
When
point,
you
then
say
they
him,
began
you mean-
struggling themselves.
Stop for a second.
Sorry.
When you say him, you mean the accused
The accused.
pulled on the collar of Officer Fantasia
Yes.
and pulled him off of Mr. Friedbrain.
Yes.
And where do the two parties end up at that point? When I mean two parties, I mean the accused and Officer Fantasia.
They're both struggling on the ground for a moment before they return to their feet.
All right. And can you overhear any of the discussion or anything that's said between the accused and Officer Fantasia during the course of that struggle?
No, I was not able to.
So the two of them are able to get back up, you said?
Yes.
And about how far apart are the accused and Officer Fantasia?
They were not too far apart from each other. There was enough distance to strike for the accused to be able to strike. Detective Fantasia.
And you're approaching, I take it you're approaching on a run at this point, right?
Yes.
And at some point, do you indicate that you're a police officer, or do you give instructions or commands at some point as you're running toward this altercation?
Yes, I was. Continuously, I was running up. I was shouting that I was the police and for everyone to stop.
When you say shouting, tell me what you mean by shouting.
As an example right now?
No, but I mean, you're talking about you're using a loud voice?
Yes, absolutely.
The shouting, making the command to stop, that you're a police officer, do those commands and shouts occur before or after the accused strikes Officer Fantasia?
I was shouting that I was the police and to stop before the accused struck the detective.
And how far are you away from the accused and Officer Fantasia as you're shouting this immediately before the punch takes place?
I was only a few meters. I was very close.
And again, shouting.
Yes.
And as you're shouting this and approaching this before the punch takes place, is there any response from the accused? Is there any indication at that point that the accused is aware of your presence?
Not that I was aware of.
How long is the accused and the officer standing on their feet before the punch takes place?
It must have been just a few seconds.
And do you overhear anything that's said between the two of them at that point?
No.
Prior to the punch taking place, what, if anything, do you see Officer Fantasia do?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Immediately before the punch takes place, what, if anything, do you see Officer Fantasia do?
He was doing nothing. He had just stood up. He was not making any subsequent moves.
And what did you do next?
I tackled the accused to the ground and rolled them onto their front to commence an arrest. And I'd been telling him as well, police. And at that point, I believe that the accused had noticed my identity and had stopped resisting. And we effectively completed the arrest.
So did you yourself witness the punch take place?
Yes.
And were you able to tell with what force the accused used when he punched Officer Fantasia?
No, not to the amount of force, but it was a solid punch to the face.
And what happened to Officer Fantasia?
He was struck and recoiled back slightly, but afterwards he said that he was okay.
And what did you place the accused under arrest for?
For assaulting a police officer and effectively intervening in a police action.
Just have a moment, please, Your Honor. If we could just break for a moment. I
Sure.
don't know, there's an utterance perhaps that is relevant, and I know we're not going to have time to do a proper voir dire on that, so I'm not sure whether I can do
Want to
that for the
confer with
purposes
Mr.
of this.
Marley down there?
For the purposes of this exercise. Okay, all right. So we're going to assume that a voir dire has been done.
All right.
And
And
that's-
assume that I've allowed the utterance in.
That's right.
All right.
All right.
Hold on, Mr. Hu. And this is an utterance by Mr. O'Brien.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So officer, you become involved now and you've placed the accused under arrest. Is
Yes.
that correct? And what, if anything, did the accused say to you with regard to the assault or the altercation that had taken place between the officer and Mr. Friedbrain?
Immediately after I had commenced the arrest, the accused had asked me to get the other person, at
I'm
which
sorry, to what the other person?
to grab them.
Oh,
At which point I was assuming they were meaning the detective.
Well, he said something else to you, did he not? Do you have notes in front of you, sir? Do you have something in front of you?
Yes, I have small notes here.
All right, and those are notes that you made?
Yes,
And when did you make them?
the next day.
Mr. Marley, are you content that the officer refer to his notes?
I am.
All right, thank you. Go
So,
ahead, Mr. Gould.
Officer, for the purposes of refreshing your memory, if you would look at the second page of your notes, you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And the last sentence on the first paragraph, the top of the page.
Yes,
Does
the
that-
accused had
hold
said
on,
that.
wait for me, please. Does that help refresh your memory with regard to what it was that the accused may have said to you after the arrest?
Yes.
All right. And what, now that your memory has been refreshed, what, if anything, did the accused say to you after the arrest had been made?
Well, it's not a direct quote, but the accused had said that they saw that the detective was pummeling the other person.
Okay. What were the words that the accused said to you in accordance with your notes?
That the cop was pummeling the other person.
All right. Now, can you indicate what, if any, injuries you saw on the part of, or that were sustained by Officer Fantasia as a result of the punch?
I was not able to observe any injuries. He said that he was not injured, but he was sore.
All right, sir, those are my questions. If you stay there, Mr. Marley will have questions.
The judge says to the jury, you can't take into account his record to show that he's the type of person who would commit this offense. The jury might do it anyway. The jury's entitled to disregard your instructions. So you have to say that to your client. Do you wish to testify? Here's the benefits of it. Here's the downside of it. I mean, if you have, for instance, if you have an accused who's charged with sexual assault, and the accused has a record for sexual assault, if he doesn't testify, the jury doesn't know that he has that record. If he does testify, and it doesn't matter what the judge tells them about the accused record, certain jurors will say, well, if he did it once, he did it again. And that's totally contrary to what the judge will instruct them. But Mr. Marley, neither Mr. Marley and Mr. Houle nor I are entitled to go into the jury room and find out why they convicted, but that would be my guess as to why they convicted.
Isn't that test quite high, though, for similar fact evidence on past convictions?
Well, not necessarily.
For sexual assault?
No. You know, you have what's called a Corbett application, and if the judge feels it's prejudicial, judge won't allow it. If the judge says it isn't prejudicial, it goes in. And Ken will tell you that before the accused decides whether to testify, he's entitled to a ruling from the judge as to what part of his record, if he makes a Corbett application, he's entitled to know whether I, as the judge, will say, I won't allow the Crown to talk about this conviction or this conviction or this conviction, but I will allow the Crown to talk about this conviction.
So it's always a difficult decision whether you call a client or not. And one of the things you definitely want to know is, as His Honor pointed out, how much of the record you're going to be confronted with before you put your client in the box. That's for sure.
Guy Cottrell, who you guys are too young, he's a graduate from the University of Windsor. I think he was in first year when I was in third year, was an absolutely magnificent jury lawyer. And he used to wail at me all the time. He said, I told him he shouldn't testify. I hate when my client testifies. When my client testifies, my client always loses. I don't want my client to testify. And there's a lot of lawyers who believe that, because that takes into account the burden of the proof on the Crown, that the accused doesn't have to prove anything. It's the Crown that has to prove everything. So, but Guy used to say that. I know you were around for Guy.
I remember Mr. Cottrell, yeah, absolutely.
He might be called an iconic character. That's all. One day I'm going to give a speech about Cottrell. So, unfortunately, he passed on. He died of cancer when he was mid-40s? Mid-40s, I would imagine. But it was a magnificent lawyer. And one day I'm going to give a speech about him. I don't know. And I wasn't that close to him.